Welcome to The Pluck. This is a show about how we write, record, and play music for plucked string instruments. That's guitar, bass, banjo, mandolin, anything with strings that you can pluck. It's designed for serious players like composers, songwriters, producers, and educators who can already make music but want a clearer path for turning these ideas into finished and performable music that feel good under the hands and are good for the stage and the studio. Each of these episodes is a long-form conversation with someone living this life in the real world, so we can borrow their principles and hear their stories behind the records and the scores and build our own shared language for plucked string music. Today on The Pluck, I'm joined by Jason Vieaux, a Grammy-winning classical guitarist described as among the elite of today's classical guitarists, from solo recitals and concertos on some of the world's greatest stages to collaborations that stretch across classical, chamber, and jazz-influenced music. Jason has built a career that's both deeply rooted and wildly curious. He's also a respected educator, helping guitarists around the world refine their sound, technique, and musical voice. So I'm excited to dig into how he writes, records, and plays at this level. So Jason.
Hi, Jonathan.
Where are we catching you today?
I'm actually home, in between concerts and teaching at Cleveland Institute of Music. So I go tomorrow to Columbia, South Carolina, to the university there and play a recital and I do a master class there. And then on to Mesa, Arizona with Grammy-winning cellist Zool Bailey. And then from there to DC for a program with Anna Myers. It's kind of a tough week because it's 3 different programs in one across 7 or 8 days.
That's a lot for 1 week.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I've done it lots for many years, but it's very hard to control the booking, especially when you have kind of these bigger series. You know, you want to try to maintain those relationships and such. So sometimes they just don't fall exactly where you would like to have them. But yeah.
How do you keep up with so much repertoire in such a small amount of time?
As I tell my students, I start early and often as possible. I mean, I realistically, I only really get about maybe 3 hours a day to practice because most of my time around the classical guitar is a lot of office work between 2 guitar departments, and then just of course the concert business and maintaining those relationships and with collaborators and conductors and that kind of thing. So I try to start, my calendar is a very interesting thing to people because I'll pick a date that's, fairly far out that gives me more than enough time. At this point, of course, I know I can look at a piece of music and I can pretty much pinpoint how long it's going to take to learn if it's new, or how long it's going to take to refresh if it's something I've played before. And those all go into the calendar, like start, Yatali cello sonata or start this, or start, Rodrigo Concierto d'Aranjuez I've played, over 200 times. So that doesn't require quite as much work to get it back together. So I can do that in about a week.
So do you literally put that in your calendar, like when to start practicing those pieces?
Yep.
Excellent.
Yeah, and I keep logs, and then in my notes, part of my phone, I keep logs of how much I've, if I put check marks, okay, I got it this many times, and that just keeps me honest, keeps my stress level down too.
Along this path of preparing the music, what helps you get ready for like that first rehearsal, like mentally, that you feel like, oh, this is ready? How do you know when you're ready?
Well, if it's newer pieces, you don't really quite know until you get into the first rehearsal. So if it's something fairly new, like, for example, a week from this Saturday with Anna at Dumbarton concerts in DC, that's that program now we played recently in January, but a lot of that stuff was the first time I'd played, those pieces. So the amount of work leading up to the first concert was a lot more than the next. You just have to maintain it. And really the hardest thing on the program to play, I would say, would be the Handel violin sonata, the continuo part that Andy Poxon arranged for me, who's a former student of mine and an incredible musician and guitarist. So it's just a matter of kind of staying with it and not leaving it until the last few days before rehearsal. But yeah, first rehearsals are always a little bit like, well, you're kind of feeling your way through. But with experienced musicians, it's really just a playthrough. You just do just a kind of nice, easy playthrough, and then you kind of work on some details in a second run. And that's honestly, that's usually about it. It's not a lot of rehearsal it's not the kind of real, focused, dedicated rehearsal that, say, a dedicated duo might have, right? Where they're more like, they're very polished, almost like a diamond, in that sense. They have that opportunity if they're together, and then that's kind of their main gig, right? In mainstream classical music, a lot of these things are a type of collaborations where you get together for a few concerts during the season, and the presenters are excited by that often in the mainstream kind of thing, because it's, two names of their instruments. Like Anna Kiko is a big name on violin. So when you partner up like that, it's kind of like you're bringing sort of the fan bases from both of those two musicians together. Right.
Very interesting. So there's a whole different kind of energy, I guess, between these concerts where you only meet once or twice and then you play it, and then there's like these concerts where maybe you have an established ensemble, that you've been rehearsing with for a while. There's a different energy. Oh yeah. It feels very different once you've gotten the first couple concerts out of the way, like once you've gotten them done. And the first one we did about a month ago it went terrific. So, and then the week before that, I was with Yolanda, and we were doing a couple world premieres on that one, because we're going to slowly. The idea is that we slowly add world premieres until we have enough to make a new album. And the 12-year follow up to Together, the Together album. See that once we basically played that record, that was our program for 5, 6, 7 years or something like that. And yeah, it was a very well-oiled machine, of course, after the first year. Is this a normal thing to kind of play a lot of concerts ahead of time and then cut the record, or how does that work? I think in the case of Yolanda, that's the way we did it. It's always it's better. I think, well, not necessarily. I mean, but usually if you've played the material, you're a lot more comfortable. There's a lot less, going back and forth, I think, in the recording process, if the performers already know the piece and they've already been playing it. In the case of Anne's record that I did in 2021 called Shining Night, that was something where we had done a couple concerts where we played the Piazzolla History of the Tango. But then Anne and Yolanda both are very focused on programming when it comes to a CD, when it comes to an album, and the track order and what things would go well together, and a theme. There's almost always a kind of a theme running through it, like a narrative, that where the title is a reflection of that and a reflection of the pieces. So a lot of that with Anne, for example, you kind of play them. I think a lot of that record was done for the first time in the recording process, which, was, a little bit kind of, there's definitely an element of the unknown there. And David Frost is producing, and Silas Brown also producing, like two multi-Grammy winning producers and stuff. So it's definitely a different kind of thing. You're discussing a lot of like collaborations as a guitarist. as a classical guitarist. Can you talk a little bit more on this experience? Do you find it to be an important element of your career? And how important would it be for other guitarists too?
Well, I think as a model for other guitarists, it's good because if you can, I mean, of course, it depends on your ability or capacity to learn lots of repertoire. I mean, I've been basically playing anywhere from 7 to 10 hours of different repertoire for, I don't know, almost 20 years now. Mm-hmm. And the bulk of that per season, of course, is collaborations because, even concertos, I think the most number of I mean, in a given concert year, I may have played like the 2 Rodrigo and a Vivaldi and maybe like one other one like Villa-Lobos within a season, but that's about it. Right. Mm-hmm. And all those I've played many times. So collaborations really do add. That's the thing you want to one wants to tread carefully because it really does add a lot to your practice, Mm-hmm. And now as I'm getting into more, I guess more of I'm in my early 50s now and my kids are growing up and I like to be with them. I don't want to be practicing 6 hours a day when I'm home. First of all, it's almost impossible to do that anyway. Mm-hmm. But you try to combine some of the things too. Like Piazzolla History of the Tango is a very, durable, multi-purpose kind of thing. Like you could play with violin, you could play with, flute. I've done it with bandoneon, of course, with Julian. There's a lot of people that want to play that piece. So that really opened up like the Piazzolla and the Defia 7 songs or 6 songs if you're playing it with a cellist or violinist. Like those really opened a lot of doors for me to chamber music festivals. And that's how and then just through the concerts themselves, the rehearsal process, there's a lot of, there was a lot of, hanging out and partying and stuff in the aughts and the 10s, especially. You make all these friends and then they tell their friends, they all got chamber music festivals around the country. And then they pass the word on and, we just had, this guitarist and he was a great hang and he and the audience loved the music and so there are these kind of usual suspect pieces that really are kind of the centerpiece of the thing and the audiences go wild for the Piazzolla. I mean they really do. It's just a sure shot. It's it's just one of those sure shots. It's not going to fail.
What made that piece become that, do you think?
Well, I mean, Piazzolla's music is very attractive, of course, and very melodic, and he's one of the most popular 20th century composers of all time. The music's very accessible, and those particular movements in History of the Tango, I would say particularly the second and third one are really A+, that's like kind of like those are 2 of his really best things, I think, the most enduring melodies and compositions. So we're very blessed to have that on guitar. I mean, I can't say enough about them really in that regard. In terms of what it does professionally for guitarists, it opens a lot of doors.
Interesting. It's like this piece, like you said, is so accessible. It's easier for even like someone who doesn't know the piece to really latch on, to the feeling of it. And the 2 movements you talk about are cafe and
nightclub.
Yeah, right.
Absolutely.
Yeah. And which is a slow movement and the fast movement, which I think are commonly paired together. Like if you don't program all 4 movements.
Yeah, those are good. That's a good pair, actually. Yeah.
Yeah.
It's an ideal pair.
Yeah. Do you know anything? I personally don't, but do you know anything about the history of that piece and how Piazzolla wrote it for the guitar?
All I know is Alvaro Pierri played it, and I believe he played it with Piazzolla, the premiere in 83. I want to say 83, 84. I know it was written in the 80s. And Alvaro Pierri was, kind of his guy for that. And I would imagine that Pierri probably helped with making the stuff fit on a guitar, right? Because it's not the most idiomatic left hand. I use a lot of that's probably one of the early pieces when I was in college that I learned how to use my LH4 as a barre.
Oh, interesting.
Which I use all the time now. I use it in every situation like that I can now. It just became second nature as a fingering option.
That's interesting. Do you recall what part of the piece that you use that as a bar?
Oh, it's in the fourth movement for sure. I think I use it in the second movement even.
Mm-hmm.
If you got that F sharp diminished and you've got the fifth fret top three strings on the fifth fret, I just, and I'd much rather, I would much rather just slap the four on the top three strings and then use the low F sharp and that kind of thing. There's just situations like that. I can't recall it off the top of my head exactly, but there's a lot. I mean, I use it so much now that I can't even count the number of situations where I use it.
You came up with like a solution to make it not only playable, but also like just musical.
Yeah.
Too.
So it's more legato. So the lines connect,
Yeah.
Yeah. And bass is important too. Like for me, the bass and the way it moves in his music is really important. That's, that you're basically like the orchestra in that piece.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. It's such a beautiful work. And that makes a lot of sense of why it's been so successful. I like to branch from there while we're on the topic of guitarists working with composers. That's a very interesting topic to me. I wrote my dissertation around that, how non-guitarist composers write for the guitar.
Right.
And that is a common theme we see in guitar literature. Yep. And so I recall, this was back in like 2020 now, but I interviewed both composers and guitarists, including, Robert Beezer and Elliot Fisk, and their collaboration on Mountain Songs, and
it's fabulous,
and things like that. Can you recall any moments of working with some composers? And give us some examples.
Yeah, some examples. I mean, it's been so many now by this point of premiered. I mean, it's probably well over 30 pieces, and some pretty substantial composers and names like Vivian Fung. These are more like kind of mainstream classical composers. Avner Dorman, the film composer Jeff Beal wrote a guitar and string quartet for me, and then we expanded that into kind of like a chamber concerto, and recorded that for BIS in 2016. And Jonathan Leshnoff, and all four of these composers right now, just off the top of my head, none of them play guitar, and so they all had slightly different approaches. I mean, most of the time they're pretty easy. Most of the time, a composer really wants the feedback from the guitarist because they don't want it to sound overly difficult for them. They want the music to flow. But sometimes there's a composer like Leshnoff was an example of that. That was a project that, I had taken over, with Nashville Symphony. He had written a guitar concerto, and Barawaco had already done the live premieres, I believe, but not the premiere recording. And I think what happened, you'd have to ask Manuel about it, but I talked with Manuel a couple times on the phone about it because I was somewhat surprised at how resistant initially Mr. Leshnoff was to me, taking, say, the first movement and taking four of these kind of examples and saying, well, this this isn't really actually playable, much less too difficult for me. It's just like there's an F sharp down here on the 6th string on 2nd fret, and a C sharp on the 9th fret on the 1st string. I mean, that's not gonna, I propose that we flip the bass up an octave. That's like a regular thing that you do in the guitar. Mm-hmm. Well, some of those things he was okay with, but then some of them, it was surprising. He wasn't. And which we kind of had come to an impasse a little bit. And Barueco, when I talked with him, he had come to the same kind of impasse. Huh. And somehow I managed to convince him that Andres Segovia, John Williams, Julian Bream, Sharon Isbin, Elliot Fisk, on and on, they were given a certain level of, or a certain measure of freedom to at least initially suggest other solutions that were playable to the instrument. And particularly if you could write, if you can compose, and I was arranging, things in high school, for solo guitar, just for fun, just, for my own enjoyment. Mm-hmm. You can find these kind of solutions pretty quickly. It doesn't take very long. So I kind of hashed it out with him on the phone, and even after it was 8 spots. It was like 8 spots in the concerto. And he said, well, okay, well, they sound good when you're playing them over the phone. It was kind of like a video conference kind of thing. I don't even think I had Zoom yet. This was like in 2016 or 17. Uh-huh. And, he said, okay, well, he's like, well, it sounds good, but just please try to play it like the way I wrote it, exactly the way I wrote it, which didn't really make sense because because they were unplayable in that sense. So anyway, I consulted Barueco, I consulted Manuel, and I consulted Roberto Diaz, my boss at Curtis, because he had played 2 different pieces by Leshnov. One was a viola solo piece that was very playable for the viola, and it was like a solo spot, almost like a chamber concerto. And then the other one was a string quartet, and he said that part had the same kind of problems, like where there was like a big stretch across the viola that would your fingers would have to be like 10 inches long in order to reach the thing. And so, so he said, he had just suggested, just go to rehearsal, do your changes, do your edits, and just play them. That's it. That's all you can do. It's out of your control at this point. And that's exactly what I needed to hear. Like you had to be willing to just sort of go there and maybe, I don't know, get yelled at or something. I don't know. So
right.
we're in the read through at first rehearsal in that gorgeous orchestra hall that Nashville Symphony has. And they're a great orchestra, just really great. Uh-huh. We're reading through the first movement, and Leshnov's, sitting in the hall, and he's got a light. He's got one of those flashlights on his forehead, and he's looking
so he can see the score.
So he can see the score in the darkened hall, and he's going over to whatever. And then we read through the first movement, and of course I'm playing what I can play. And he slowly gets up from his chair and he starts walking towards the front of the stage with real direction. And I'm thinking, okay, here it comes. Here we go. and he looks up. The stage is really raised from the floor. He looks up and he goes, it's amazing. It's fantastic. Just do what you're doing or whatever. Like he would say that after every movement. I was like, it's okay. He's like, it's wonderful. It just sounds great. It's like he had to hear it with, it's a trust issue. He didn't trust, which I totally understand. It's his baby. And that piece, by the way, is just a fabulous, fabulous concerto for guitar. I just think it's one of the best things ever written for guitar and orchestra. It's so beautiful and exciting and pyrotechnic and, great flash and great lyricism and it's wonderful. So after the third movement, he said the same thing, and then we were on our way and everything was peaches after that,
Right. So he had to hear you.
He had to hear me. That's it. That's all it was. I had this thing in my head that wasn't real. You know, I had this kind of fear in my head that wasn't, that was not real. It was not reality.
Yeah. You didn't want to disappoint him.
No.
Yeah. And, but you really wanted to serve the music and just play your best in those moments. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, if it was just for a performance, I think the stress of it would have been a little bit less. It's just the fact that it was going to be a live recording. They were going to record all 3 concerts live, and then that's it. That's what you get. I mean, we had a patch session for 10 minutes, and most of it was for solo instruments that in the orchestra that had a brief solo. And I think I got one or 2 takes on like the one thing that he allowed me to do. That was it. I mean, that what you hear on the recording is like, this is stitched together from 3 live performances.
So the patching process with an orchestra, how does that work?
Well, you're just sitting there. The voice comes in over the intercom, and you know he's already briefed Maestro, you know, Guerrero there on what they're gonna try to get in about a half an hour or 20 minutes or whatever it was. It felt like 10 minutes, like that we had for everything, you know.
Wow. And did you have any say on like, oh, can I punch in like this measure, that measure?
I mean, you could say, you can ask, you can always ask, but it's a time thing because it's union and they only had a certain amount of time to get it done. I thought it turned out great. I mean, for a live recording, like that's, you know, that's that whole series on Naxos. That's all American composers. Those are all basically like they're edited live, but they're live with an audience there.
So is this piece on an album with other works? Is that
other works by Leshnov? So he got that's okay. and again, that's probably why, you know, he was so invested in it, because, you know what I mean, like, because that's one in the series. Michael Dougherty, you know, has one, and you know, it's a series on Naxos specifically, you know, around one composer, Kip Winger. Do you remember Winger, the hair metal band? So he was a classical music composer before, you know, he was a composer before Winger, right? You know, as I like to say, Winger, we're all a bunch of ringers. You know, there are a lot of so great, you know, like really great musicians that got in on the hair metal thing at the, you know, while it was really hot. So he got one too. You know, he has a series. He has a CD of all you know, Kip Winger with Nashville and Guerrero. It's a wonderful series.
Excellent. How cool.
But I would say that in comparison, it's usually a lot easier. Like, you know, if you know, Abner Dorman and I just basically texted each other. I would write out my solution, text it to him. He'd read it over. He's like, "Yeah, looks good." You know, he didn't really have any changes. So.
A whole different exchange. Yeah.
And I'm the kind of guy that would welcome if another guitarist wanted to play How to Love for guitar and string quartet, and they wanted to have a go at their own edits and that kind of thing with Abner. That would be totally fine with me. I've never, you know, needed to claim ownership over it or anything like that. I think just because you end up being the one that premieres it, and then I played that piece a lot, you know, afterwards, so it gets associated with you. But if one were to tackle it, you know, I would welcome, you know, any solutions that they might have, you know, for some of those things that were unplayable.
Do you have any suggestions for like composers who are curious about writing for the guitar, but not sure where to start?
Start with a guitar player. You know, I mean, if you can work with a really good guitar player, that's the thing, especially with, I think, particularly with Bream, was, I think, the relationships, those working relationships with, say, Benjamin Britten, Malcolm Arnold, there's a lot of English composers, but also Toru Takamitsu. They just hang out for like a week or two at his house or at their house. and they would just go over it. They would just go over the score and make it fun. Those are really fun when that happens like that. And that way it's all done in one shot. The composer sanctions it. Guitarist feels comfortable enough playing it, and that's the right way to do it. Segovia, I think, had to do a lot of that stuff with Castello Tedesco by letters, because he was just never not on the road. I mean, his life was just, to me, like absolutely crazy. I mean, so a lot of the correspondence, they rarely were able to get together. And some of those suggestions that Segovia had, Castello Tedesco was okay with, and then some of them was like, well, I don't know, it's a little bit like that. Ponce was a little bit more, open or forgiving, or in that sense, but Segovia just did an unbelievable amount of those kind of things for guitar.
Right.
It's just hard to imagine that he ever slept.
Yeah. Yeah. Especially given the context of some of those letters.
Yeah. And then they're writing letters, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
I mean, I get pissed off if my voice dictation doesn't take on the phone the right way, and I got to go back and change a word or two. I mean, could you imagine? I mean, just handwriting these letters.
Yeah.
And then picking them up at the post office in Barcelona or in Italy, or, I mean, just crazy.
Right. The pacing of things, much different.
Yeah.
Much
you can
different,
feel the urgency in those letters when you read them. You could just feel the stress coming from both of them, but particularly Segovia.
Yeah. Yeah. Huh. So how is technology today? How is it helping or hurting us with the collaboration?
Oh, process? I think it's definitely helping, because it's much more like if you were a composer and we were working on this just like right through this medium that we're using right now, it was very easy and very quick. It saves a lot of time. So.
And I would also say, but there's also a different sense of urgency too with, technology, how quickly it is to access, each other, just,
right.
Through stuff like that. And so we have to, there's a little balance there I've been finding too, is this, balancing communications,
right.
Because everyone can access you so quickly.
Right.
Right. So how do you manage that balance?
Oh, yeah.
As an artist,
what I call office. Yeah. That's what I call
right.
Yeah. I mean, some of my colleagues, a couple of them laughed at me. They sort of giggled when I said, "Oh, got to go to the office," in the late 90s. Oh, the office. Oh, your office. You mean your one bedroom apartment? Yeah. But if you think about it, it really was the beginnings of an office, with my manager as the center. And then, guitar presenters were really not comfortable back in those days approaching a manager. So I had an agreement in those early days, late 90s, early 2000s, that if a guitar festival or a guitar series wanted to approach me, to let, sometimes a lot of it is just feeling it out. Like, she had to trust me with the sense that let me talk to them first, let's hear about what they want, or what in terms of repertoire, and then what I can do for that season without getting myself into too much trouble. And then, I got this Ponce record coming out, the sonatas. I'd like to play at least one from that, and and then you hand them over. Then they're more comfortable to finish off the contract and talk about money with the manager. And that was kind of like a regular thing, because I always wanted to have one foot firmly planted in the guitar scene, right, and to continue to build that, but also through the collaborations and through orchestras, you get solo recitals. I get I've gotten lots and lots and lots of solo recitals on mainstream, what I'm calling mainstream classical series for sure. But to really build the relationships in that end of the business, it's really collaborations and concertos. Like orchestra's a different world. It's an entirely different world from chamber musicians. You know,
right.
They're like a different universe from each other.
Yeah, that makes sense.
So the office thing becomes very, very important. You start to figure out like, oh wow, this stuff takes a lot of time, you know?
Yeah, because you have to use that time to bridge, to be a bridge for these opportunities.
That's right. And to be available. I mean, like you don't have to be on call like a doctor or anything, but you got to be available. Right. You know? Because they're putting a brochure together. They're putting a season together, and they want to do one that's focused on guitar. And some of them just want all Spanish and Latin American, or some want, well, we like these newer things that you do too. We would love to hear the Vivian Fung. We've got a violinist, right? Or something like that, you know? So
with this office idea, do you have office hours as a musician?
I've tried to do that. I'd rather do a lot of that stuff in the morning, but the problem is when you're teaching at two conservatories and you're doing all this touring, after a while I learned, well, this is going to push my practicing into the evening or into the afternoon and stuff like that. And I try to get, my day goes much smoother. My 10 to 12 hour day goes much smoother if I start with practicing.
You start with practicing,
right?
Yeah,
because then you've got some time in. If you can grab a third hour later, great. Icing on the cake.
Yeah, that makes sense. It's starting the day with something very important. I mean, to keep up your chops so you do well in those evening recitals and concerts.
Yep.
Yeah.
When I started out, it was always much more comfortable to practice at night because your brain was just used to performing at night. And it's still kind of like that. They're still like that. It was when I was in my 20s, it was very hard. It was very hard to start practicing at like 8 a.m. or something like that. Very difficult for me.
Right.
Because I never did it in high school. I never practiced before 3 p.m. in high school, or whatever grades. What was I, 8 when I started? So grade school, you hear those stories about parketing, like his father would get him out of bed at like 5 a.m. and stuff and make sure he practiced a couple hours before he went to school. We never, my parents never did that.
Yeah, right. So you started when you were 8 years old? Wow.
Yeah.
Wow. And
either 1 week after my 8th birthday or 1 week before. It was in July.
Okay. So you were around what, 3rd grade?
Yeah, I guess so. Yeah. Sounds about right. 3rd grade.
Somewhere around there. And did you start on classical guitar?
Yeah. I started with a founding member of the Buffalo Guitar Quartet where I grew up. Jeremy Sparks was the primary arranger for the quartet, and he mainly played kind of the parts that John Dearman, I guess, might play in Los Angeles Guitar Quartet, like kind of more of the lower voice bass parts and that kind of thing. Because he was busy with arranging. I mean, like a lot of the bulk of their recitals were his arrangements in those days. So I got a great chamber music training from him because we played duos a lot in lessons. We played a lot of duos. We went through those. I remember like a big anthology for me was that Node Renaissance anthology.
Oh, yes. Yeah.
And I learned everything in that book, and all the duos I would just play with my teacher in lessons. So I got a nice early chamber music training there as well. How to listen outside of what I was playing, how to listen outside of myself.
Yeah, there's an element about that that's I think really advantageous for a young player to not just like kind of be so focused on your own thing, but to share it with your teacher, to play with your teacher. Yeah.
Right. I call it antenna. It's like, I call it chamber music antenna for my students. So he's like, yeah, you're in, so, some of them are quite good at it, naturally. But then some are, they're kind of in soloist mode, and I can tell they're not listening to their partner, and, or they don't know the score, or they don't know their partner's part, which is super, super important.
Yeah. Yeah. So you're not like a soloist on the side, but you're weaving in your part with theirs. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, you're the accompanist in most of those situations. I mean, the vast majority of them.
Right.
You're accompanying them, not the other way around.
So those earlier lessons really taught you a lot about collaboration. And so no wonder you are where you are now from those initial experiences.
Yeah, because then when I got into college, I just started collaborating not only with classical pieces, standard repertoire, but also, like two doors down next door in the dorm, my freshman year was a composer, Paul Osterfield, and he asked if I would, I'd be practicing 3 or 4 hours a day once I got to college. And practicing sometimes in my dorm room, and the word got around, like people wanted to collaborate with me. 2 doors down the other way was Evan Price, and he taught me how to read chord symbols. He taught me how to read a lead sheet. And then we ended up starting a little band together with the percussionist Damian Bassman, and we had a little jazz trio. We made a demo. My roommate was Alan Bice, who's recorded all my albums, and we won a Grammy together, and he won 2 Grammys with Ataka Quartet, the string quartet. And so he's rolling, but we were freshmen in the dorm. So we had this whole little kind of cabal going right there. We had a producer. He made a demo cassette for us. And then, like I said, then on the other side of our dorm room, Paul Osterfield was like, I'd like to write something for you. So I'd like the combination to be, I think it was oboe, viola, and guitar. And so I would just say yes to all those things. There was a tuba player, and he wanted to do all blues at the end of his recital, all blues by Miles Davis. He's like, nice. So can you play guitar on that? And you could take a solo over the changes, right? Stuff like that. I jumped at the chance to do that kind of stuff back then.
And this was all undergrad, college?
All undergrad. Yep.
Yeah.
I don't know how many of those things I did.
Wow.
Yeah.
And what college was that?
Cleveland Institute of Music, where I teach.
CIM.
Yep. That's my alma mater.
And who was your teacher then?
John Holmquist.
Oh, Holmquist.
Winner of the Toronto competition, 1978.
Yeah.
May he rest in peace.
Yes. We all know his recordings really well. Yeah.
They're great.
Yeah.
They're just great. That's where I learned, that's where I really got my sound production, or, what we guitarists like to call tone. But I call it, I think sound production is a little bit more, puts a finer point on it. Because you could teach anyone to get a good tone, right? Like we value a nice round tone, but you can teach anybody to do that. It doesn't take that much to, it's like one 10-minute lesson. And but developing a sound was what was really the concept with me, and it went hand in hand with correcting some mechanics in my right hand, particularly my A finger, and my thumb stroke and my A finger together, this kind of thing. So I did a lot of this. Like this kind of lobster claw type of thing in arpeggios. Lots of arpeggios my first year. Yeah. And I was begging to play repertoire, and he's like, well, okay, if you got to jump through these hoops first. And then he'd give me a half recital in my freshman year. Because when I auditioned for him, I'd already learned like 75 pieces of music. somebody, and was doing recitals in Buffalo and Rochester and Genesee, all that, some areas in between and that kind of thing. I was a very experienced performer. I performed live on the Buffalo Classical Station and the Rochester Classical Station, like live concerts, like during the afternoon, and it was, so I had a lot of performance experience when I went in. So for him to get me to slow down and just to invest in my golf swing, was pretty remarkable of him to do that. And I'm forever grateful because it really helped get my technique together.
Did he call it tone or sound production? Or something else?
I don't know. I guess he called it tone. Well, he said your sound needs work, and he said your technique sucks. He told me those were his exact words. Your technique sucks, which no one had ever said anything like that to me before.
Wow.
And the reason he did it, because he wanted me to understand the difference between facility and technique. So I think it was like it was either that lesson or the next one. He said it kind of hit me with that initial jab, and I was like, wow. God, David Russell never told me my technique sucks. You know what I mean? Right?
Right.
Or Leona Boyd never, or Carlos Barbosa Lima or Jorge Morel, they were, they've
never said anything.
They never said anything like that. In fact, like some of these masterclass guests in Rochester would go over to my parents and be like, he'd be playing on stage already. If he was in Europe, he'd already be playing professionally, to which, the background that my parents came from, my mother was like, oh my God, really? So for him to say my technique sucked was sort of like, wow. But then it dawned on me again that what he meant was my mechanics. I had faulty mechanics, and I was playing really, really fast and really, really well in spite of these faulty mechanics. But then I needed to correct my thumb mechanic and my A to really achieve a new level of playing. And he was exactly right.
Mm-hmm. Was it how deep did he go with that? Was it kind of like he told you the general thing and then like you had to figure it out, or was he like, no, he would give me, he
would give me the Segreras method. Is the Segreras method, which had, a lot of these kind of etudes where a lot of bass and treble melodies together with accompaniment in between. And so my thumb and my ring finger had to look a certain way, right? They had to sort of, the contact point had to be exact, and I had to practice that, and Giuliani arpeggios too, which I think are just indispensable to the guitarist's development.
Mm-hmm. All 120.
Why not?
Why not?
I mean, you don't have to do all 120, but I mean, but it's not going to hurt you.
Right. Wasn't John really big with like Regandi etudes?
Yeah. That was, because he and David Starobin were starting to play those. That was around my junior year or sophomore year. And so he was really deep into those kind of things. And of course I wanted to learn one of them. And I ended up learning a set of 3 for my GFA tour when I won the GFA my junior year. So, and I think Regandi 8 was in my final program in that GFA competition. Mm-hmm.
And that was on the album, the Naxos album, right?
Yeah. No.
The Regandi?
Well, No, I had made my own self-produced album with Alan Bice, the aforementioned Alan Bice, and another producer engineer, Jim Bonney, who's one of my guitarist colleagues studying with John. So we made that record together, and there was a wonderful benefactor back at home in Buffalo that financed it. There was two that chipped in on making it. It cost $3,000 to make a CD back then and press I think it was 500 copies, something like that. And I sold those on $3,000.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
Huh.
Yeah, we did it in Buffalo at this record plant pressing thing. Alan would send the DAT. It was on a digital audio tape back then.
Right.
That was before it went direct to digital on a hard drive. And I sold that record on the GFA tour. That was a first. No one had their own record to sell on a GFA tour. But I, to my knowledge, I was told like it was kind of like a thing. Like the presenters, the regular presenters on the GFA circuit were like, "Wow, this is awesome that you have your own CD already."
So that was by your design.
That wasn't even my idea. That was Alan's idea. He's like,
that was Alan's. Okay.
He and Jim, I remember very distinctly. They wanted it. They gave me a phone call. My phone rang at my apartment. This is way before cell phones. And he's like, Jay, Jim and I were thinking we'll get together. We'll come over to your place. We'll come over to your apartment and want to talk. We want to sort of propose something for you. We were all juniors. We're all juniors in college.
Uh-huh.
And they sat down on the couch and it was like a real proper meeting. And he said, we think you should make a CD and have it ready to go before you embark on this tour. Because the word had gotten around and everything that it was going to be a year long. It was 53 concerts. I had to take a year off of school in order to do it,
Uh-huh.
So, yeah, it was a great idea.
Yeah, that album, I'll say inspired my, I would say, yeah, it was in high school. It inspired me a lot in high school, learning the classical guitar. I studied with Dr. Stephen Robinson.
Oh yeah,
in high school and
Steve for
undergrad
ever, yeah.
And that was one of the first pieces. One of the first, I would say, big pieces I got, like in high school, which was the Marilyn.
The Marilyn. You're referring to the first Naxos CD,
the Sweet Del Recuerdo. Okay,
yes.
So this is different.
That was my second album, technically. We made a self-produced album, and I think that probably helped in getting the invitation from Naxos. But the Naxos one you're referring to, of mostly Latin American music, is the one that most people think of as my first album.
Oh, okay. Yeah, gotcha. Yeah, I remember the CD and in Dr. Robinson's room at Stetson. He had a big CD player and speakers and whatnot, and you put the CD on, and and that was like one of my first like wow moments of hearing a record, like a classical guitar record in high school,
right?
And really being so inspired by really. I mean, all of your playing, but like definitely the sound production.
Yeah, Norbert and Bonnie, man, they're just amazing. Yeah,
yeah, and then just learning that piece, that Sweet Del Recuerdo was, and I still play it to this day because it just, I don't know. There's something about that piece. It's also an accessible one too.
Oh yeah.
I think.
Oh, there's definitely something about that piece. I mean, I'm playing it again. I'll play it for a few years and then I put it away for a few years and then I bring it back or whatever. It just kills every time. I always put it at the end of the program. Mm-hmm. I always put it as the last piece because the Joropo is such a great finale.
Yes.
Not only to the suite, it really finishes off the suite like very well. The pacing and the timing of all the events that happen in that suite is just excellent. And then to have it at the end of the program, it's like if they're not ready for an encore after that, I don't know what's going to do it,
Do you know much about the history of that piece, like how it came to be?
I'm sort of an indirect part of that history because while I was on my GFA tour with my little self-produced CD that I had, which was basically it was my GFA program. Danza Brasilera, Second Lute Suite, Ponce Sonatina Meridional, 3 Regandi Etudes, and I'm trying to think of one other thing. Well, I think that's all of them. So I was on the GFA tour and I was staying with Richard Long. right, in Tampa. I was playing at some college, I think, there in the Tampa area. And so my host was Richard and Mary, his wife Mary. And that's when I, really got to know them, stayed with them for a few days. And I think I had a long stay there because I was sort of stuck, right? Like there was a 3 or 4 day kind of period, and Richard said to the GFA, "Well, yeah, we'll put him up or whatever. We'll take him around Tampa and feed him and that kind of thing," which was really nice. But what he also did was he would put a big stack of music in front of me every day. And he'd go, "Now try this guitar, and now try this guitar, and try this guitar." He had like 50 guitars in his house. And a lot of them were given to him by Pepe Romero. He's really good friends with Pepe. So I played this guitar, and then I'd read this piece, and then he was already by that point, it was well into the publishing of his publishing company, Tuscany. So he shows me this draft of the Merlin. And he goes, and he says, you play Latin American music, so well. I mean, he felt like, you so well. I think you should really look at this. I'm about to publish it, but only the composer plays the piece currently. Like nobody nobody knew about the piece at the time. And that was one of the more fortuitous happenings for me, I would say, in my career, was that piece. Because then the next year, then I got off the GFA tour, went back to school to finish my bachelor's degree, and I programmed it at my senior recital, and Naxos came calling that same year. And wow, and I just did a mostly Latin American program around that suite. So
incredible, yeah.
It's amazing to think about the serendipity of all that. Really, actually, even just talking about it right now.
It sounds like a catalyst of some type.
Yeah.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
And Marilyn, I mean, he emailed me a few months ago again, saying, wanted to thank me because now we're doing a version. I'm doing a version with Annie Kiko 2 weekends from now, or like the weekend after this one, a version for violin and guitar. So she just loves the solo piece. She just loves it. And she's like, "Oh, I want to ask Marilyn if he would do a violin guitar version." And we premiered that. That was the world premiere like a month ago in Florida.
Is there a recording of that yet?
I don't know if they recorded the concert. There's probably a recording of the concert of the concert performance of it, but we have not recorded it as of yet.
Yeah, that feels like it could be something very similar to like Piazzolla.
Yeah.
Like this, like melodic instrument, rhythm instrument, pair them together. Yeah. Then you can have so many almost permutations of that.
Yeah. That's exactly what he did. And again, the audience went crazy at the end. I mean, they just thought they had never heard, most of that audience had never heard that piece before. Mm-hmm. Never heard Jose's music. So. Yes.
Oh, very good. Very good. That is so cool. Can you think of anything that would be valuable for the community to know?
Well, I just think one thing I feel like I have to keep saying and mentioning to young players is the importance of sight reading every day. Mm-hmm. I think that's the number one stumbling block with classical guitarists, and it's understandable because our instrument is not the easiest thing to sight read polyphonic music on, right? Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Because we have more than one fingering choice. If you have like the open E, then there's an E on the 5th fret of the 2nd string and the 9th fret of the 3rd string and harmonics and like, so there's there's too many choices, right? It's not like a piano where, that middle C is only at middle C, only that one key. So guitar is a little guitar is hard to sight read on. And so really the way you get better at it is by just doing it like every day. And what I didn't realize in my 20s, why it was my early 20s, was the reason I was such a quick learner of pieces was because I was sight reading without realizing that I was sight reading all the time. You know, back in the 80s, you know, back in my day, but like, you know, back in the early 80s, mid 80s, like the prevailing thing with classical guitar culture, at least where in my neck of the woods, was you practiced the piece or two, you know, that your teacher assigned to you, and you worked on that in your lessons, and you played that and you memorized it. Like the whole thing of memorization was sort of a core value. So much so it became almost, I think, almost detrimental, right? Because we were looking at Segovia, of course, as a primary example, and Parkening, when he'd play a solo recital, he played from memory, right? So that was just kind of what you grew up assuming. So, but when my teacher would bring, when I learned Capriccio Árabe, for example, he brought that over in an anthology of Spanish music. Well, I would practice Capriccio Árabe for my lesson, but it was almost like I was in my bedroom, like, you know, kind of looking over my shoulder, and I'd just be turning the thing and reading the next thing. And I was just curious about what the other music sounded like. A lot of the time thinking that I was doing something naughty, right? Because I wasn't practicing the piece that I was supposed to be practicing that week for my lesson. Well, that turned out to be a really good thing to do, because then I eventually read everything by Soar and any kind of anthology that he brought over with a piece in it, I would read the whole thing. When I got to Cleveland Institute of Music, I discovered we had a library full of guitar music. I'd never seen anything like that before. So I read all the Ponce sonatas. Yeah. Like in my freshman year, I just read everything. I read whatever was in there. You know, the modern stuff. We had a lot of Bream repertoire of, you know, Peter Maxwell Davies and stuff like that, or, you know, Reginald Smith Brindle. And I would read all those things. So I got pretty good at reading. You know, it came when, again, the more you do it, the quicker it comes, because you start recognizing the positions and patterns and stuff like that. And it's a huge, huge advantage. Later, as I became a teacher, I realized how, excuse me, just how valuable that was to be able to do that.
And it makes you, you know, a better ensemble player too.
Of course.
You know, because, I mean, think how often you know, an orchestral player is playing new music, you know, all the time.
Yeah,
you know,
all the time.
You know, here's a score. All right, play it. Or here's a score. We got to record it. You know, like that fast. You know, and as guitarists, especially like soloists, like solo classical guitarists, I mean, you know, it's important that we have to keep up those chops on our own.
Yes.
Yeah. And because we don't have an ensemble all the time to like you almost hold us accountable.
Right. That's right.
Yeah. So yeah, sight reading, definitely very important.
I'd say that's the most, that's the thing I see most lacking in auditions. And so when I became head of the guitar department in 2001, I instituted a sight reading test for all the auditions, and that's a big how they perform on the sight reading part of the exam for the audition. We get about 20-30 minutes for an audition, so I try to save about 10 minutes at the end for them to go through. I give them 2 minutes to look at the example, you know, pick something that they almost certainly haven't seen. And they've got 2 minutes. They can't air guitar. They can't touch their guitar. They got to have their hands like flat, like just like this on their lap or whatever. Okay. They got to glean as much information from the score as they can. I said, notice the time signature, notice the key, any accidentals, rhythms, this kind of thing, position shifts and this kind of thing. Try to visualize it, some of those things. try to make a mental picture of those kind of things in the 2 minutes. And it's a 2-minute timer that I set. And then they got to perform it. They got to play it. They got to play it. And the stipulation for them, the safety valve is they could play it as slow as they want. So that's another kind of performance type of thing. It gets them to think about, well, what is the tempo that I can actually play this without stopping? And they can, again, and so they, you know, the ones that know how to play this game go really slow and not lots of them nowadays nail it. But 25 years ago, that was not the case. It was like a bit of a shock, I think, to a lot of auditioning guitarists, but it was a great litmus test for me. I would learn a lot about how quickly they were going to be able to learn a movement or a piece of music. Because that lag time, if they can't read, if they you could tell how good a reader is just in that a few minutes, and you could basically project how long it's going to take to them to learn a 5-minute piece.
Did you find any, or did you observe any of these? I don't know, comparing like how they played prepared repertoire versus how they played the sight reading.
Oh yeah,
yeah. You know, like that balance. That
absolutely. Comparison. Yeah, that comparison is good information as well. I mean, the ones that could really sight read, they sound. I'm not giving them a really difficult piece to do, obviously, right? But they would sound a really good sight reader in 2 minutes. They get those 2 minutes and then they play it real, under tempo like that. Those they sound as good as they do on their auditioning pieces.
Oh, great.
That's when okay. They're gonna learn their whole program like within they could probably learn most of their junior recital program within a semester.
Speaking of education and higher education, I like to take a step back and think about talk about like higher education for guitar.
Yeah.
Because for the longest time, guitar education in college was classical guitar. I see that changing a little bit with commercial music and things like that. So where is that guitar education now, and where is it going? What are your thoughts on that?
I don't exactly know. I mean, I would be much more comfortable staying in classical music, although I've done so much commercial music and arranging and improvising. I can play over a lead sheet, this kind of thing. I learned how to do that in college. That I know that if I had to do a curriculum or something like that, I could put something like that together. I don't know how one teaches somebody how to blow over changes. I mean, it's just more like, but they're necessarily, but I'm sure that Berklee has a sort of a system. I would imagine Berklee has some kind of system that students go through to learn how to, say, play a 2-5-1. But I just did all that stuff by ear, and I got better and better as I did it. There wasn't any. I didn't look at a book or anything. I was such a big fan of jazz music in general, and the standards and that kind of thing, and the modern stuff too, that I was just, again, playing things by ear, transcribing solos, not as a goal, just like I'd play a lick, a Miles Davis lick or whatever, and that kind of thing, and then I would listen to the rest of the solo, and then I'd kind of play along with it after a while, just on repeat or whatever, or a Steely Dan solo, like a Steely Dan guitar solo, that kind of thing. Again, this is sort of back in the days in the early 90s where maybe there was some kind of software to dictate it or whatever, but I wouldn't have been anywhere near anything like that. I had a cassette tapes and then CDs, and then you just have to sit there and rewind them.
How often have you been asked to play guitar for something that is like not classical guitar?
Like an electric guitar?
Yeah, like it's
super often.
electric or
Well, Stephen Mackey's like Stephen Mackey's stuff. Often he's a classical guitarist and an electric guitarist, and a lot of the stuff he writes is for electric guitar. So I played his string quartet in 99, 2000 called Physical Property. And that was the first time, that's the first time I ever did something with the electric guitar. I had to borrow one from one of my students. I had to borrow, it was a Gibson SG. I remember it was just kind of fun.
Oh, interesting.
And then I had to get a pedal. I had to get it required a wah pedal and a volume pedal and a distortion pedal. And so that was kind of like the most difficult part was like, okay, I got to hit this pedal at this time on this note. But it was a good experience.
I've been curious about like how important it could be for like, guitarists like going into education, how do you know, like you just want to stay on like the classical like guitar path, right? And how do you know if you want to like be broader,
how do you know if you want to be broader is if you're really curious about it, I was just very curious about that, for a long time. And I was curious, especially about arranging. It was just fun for me. Like I said, it was just fun for me to do a pop song arrangement on guitar or a jazz standard on guitar. That's how the Metheny album in 2005 came out. Those were all just by ear. I didn't have any lead sheets or anything. I did all by ear. That's why there's a couple melodic mistakes in them, because I heard something actually wrong. I would hear the melody ending on a certain note when there was actually one more melody note that I should have heard, right? But those are all just figuring, just kind of playing something and then going into the CD and rewinding it. And, okay, that's an A minor 7. Okay, this one, this is E flat, E flat, the sharp, dominant sharp 9 or whatever, this kind of thing. And then you put it together by ear. Yeah. And you have a bass line and that kind of thing. So those are all done by ear.
Did you write it out in that process?
Nope. Not until Alan Bice and Bruce Eggery at the time, when they approached me about the next record for them, and I had done the Ponce Sonatas, and then I did an Albanese record, and so we used to go to this pub, because I was of legal drinking age by then, called the Barking Spider. And it was kind of like the Case Western, and it was kind of like the local pub that was on Case campus. And it's now it's a Dave's Cosmic Subs, so it's not nearly as cool. But it was, it was right across the street from CIM. You literally walked across the street and you were there.
Wow. Okay.
So we would have a lot of meetings. We would just hang out. Actually, we were just buds. We'd go to Indians, now called the Guardians games together and all the time. And I had disposable income, started to have a little bit of disposable income then. And we were at the Barking Spider probably like, 2 times a week and other pubs, and just talking about the future and kicking around ideas. And one of those nights, it was like, Bruce was like, I've been hearing that you're doing these Pat Metheny arrangements, like you're playing them as like an encore in your recitals. And, why don't we do a Pat Metheny record? Like all Pat Metheny. I was like, all Pat Metheny? Wow. Okay. I was like, well, the tunes that I was doing them at background music gigs to fill time. Because I just enjoyed playing them. Like there were things like, not just Letter from Home, but If I Could, the ballad from First Circle, a lot of ballads. I was like, well, a lot of my arrangements are ballads. I think they're all ballads. So it'd be kind of a slow record. And I think at that point, Alan Bice was like, well, see if you could do some faster tunes or think of something. You'll think of something. You'll figure it out. We got time. We got a year. And then the idea to me came to take 5 Metheny tunes and make them into a Baroque, kind of restyle them as a Baroque kind of suite with Baroque rhythms and meters, but using his melody and harmonic structure of the tunes. And then I wrote, so like question and answer became a gavotte. And then I wrote a double over it, which is just basically blowing over changes. Like if you're a Bach, right? You know, type of, that's all that was as far as I, you know, was thinking. Oh, that'll be nice. That'll be a gavotte and a double. Now, what's going to be the G? What's going to be a Gigue? We got to have a Gigue to close. And so I took James from Off Ramp, which is, you know, it's a 4/4. It's more of like a bossa. The one, you know, 3, 4, 1, da da dee dum da dum da dum da dum da dum da 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 da. And I just switched the beat. I just recasted it in 6/8 to make it into a Gigue. And then I again found the harmonies underneath the middle, the inner voices or whatever. And then I had like a sort of like this kind of Bach lute suite type of Gigue to finish my little Baroque suite. It's just stuff like that. Once it's rolling, you're just rolling with it. I'm like, oh, this might work.
Yeah.
And it did. Actually, at the time, a lot of people thought that record was crazy, like a crazy idea to, like, you know, for a mainstream classical guitar player. But then it became a pretty popular record. You know, it became pretty well known, and I get asked about it all the time. A lot of people say it's their favorite classical guitar record. So, yeah.
Would you call that crossover? Like,
I guess, yeah. I mean, I certainly did at the time. Yeah, we would have sort of sold it that way, if you will. The record label would have, you know, kind of sold it at that.
How did they pinpoint the genre? What they decide on? Did they call it?
I think they just filed. That was still filed under this. They still filed it under classical.
Classical. Yeah. Yeah.
But it got played on jazz radio stations too. So it's like, I mean, you know.
Right. Did you work with Metheny at all with any of those?
Nope. That's how I ended up meeting him. That's how we ended up becoming friends. It's like he heard the record because there's a lot of jazz musicians that were kind of into it and that were big fans of Metheny. And then I don't know exactly how he heard it, but later on we were playing. No, that's not how it was. I hadn't made the record yet. I wanted to make the record and I wanted to get his blessing. We were playing on the same series in Richmond, University of Richmond. He was bringing his trio at the time. This is like 2003 or 4. And I was playing a concert on that series with Shanghai String Quartet. It was kind of like a mini residency. So, I remember the presenter, her name is Kathy Panoff. She took us to dinner. She took me and the Shanghai Quartet out to dinner. It's sort of a normal thing to do there after a concert. And she was talking about we were asking her about her job. So what's it like being a presenter? And like, do you have to go to all these conferences, these booking conferences? Like you go to APAP, and she's like, oh yeah, I go to APAP in New York every year, and the Midwest one in Chicago, and yada, yada, yada. And she says, I have to speak, you know, lately I'm having to speak at a lot of these things because our concert series is really big. Like they were doing like 50 concerts a year for a classical series at University of Richmond. It was, you know, pretty hefty. And so they wanted to hear my advice on how to do that. And she's like, I don't know really what to tell them other than I just have this huge amount of money to play with. I have this huge endowment to play with. So I can bring in, and she literally said like, so I can bring in I'm bringing in Pat Metheny Trio next year. And I was like, what? You're bringing in Pat Metheny Trio next year on the series that we just played on? She's like, yeah. Oh, I was like, wow, my God, I'm such a huge fan and I do a lot of arrangements of his stuff. Oh, really? She's like, oh, really? Yeah. It's like, like my label and I want to make an album like that. We want like that to be our, like a future album. And she said, well, if you can get here, they're going to be here on October, whatever it was. If you can get here, I'll give you a comp ticket and I'll introduce you to him, which to me was like, that's like saying like I'll introduce you to Paul McCartney.
Right.
You know?
Yeah.
So I drove to Richmond from Cleveland, which is about 7 or 8 hours, and saw the concert, got to meet him. And I brought some CDs for him to listen to. And he's like, oh, that's great, man. Cool. I can't wait to listen to these. But the thing is later, I think there was something going around that he had already kind of knew who I was. He already kind of was sort of checking. He checks a lot of people out on the low. That's what that whole side eye thing is. His trios now are all like, these are people that he's been checking out for a long time. He'll go kind of like incognito to a jazz club or something like that and sit in the back. Right. And then he goes, I want to play with this person maybe someday, and follows that away. So he was like, so I told him about the project, the arrangements. And then he wrote back and he said, oh, I listened to your CDs, man. They're great. And, that would be wonderful to hear it. As long as you just, if you can give me a master, if you finish the master and let me listen to them and see what you've done or whatever, meaning like right of first refusal. Like he would have the right to refuse it. Right. Yeah. Which is fine with me. And so we made the record, Alan put a quick, rough first edit that sounded decent, and he wrote back and he said, oh, this is, he was super, super happy with it. So that we had the blessing to make that that was like my third solo album with Azika.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow, how cool.
Yep. You just have to go. You have to ask. If you don't ask, it's another thing I told students. If you don't ask, you're never going to know. You're never going to know the answer. You might hear no, but you might hear yes. You might also get yes, and then you'll be really glad you asked.
Right. Because if you don't ask, then you're
never going to know.
You'll never know.
Nope. Yeah. You have to have a very thick skin. You have to have a very thick skin and have a short memory of all the no's. And to be in the music business. That's another kind of regular thing I say. I said I probably heard 49 no's for every one, for every one yes.
But you have to put yourself forward, and really give it a try, with these ideas. And to be honest, that's how we connected too,
Right.
I just put forward, I knew you were coming to Sarasota soon, for that concert and for Naples and stuff. And so I reached out and thankfully you said yes.
Yeah. Yeah.
So it worked out,
It worked out great. You never know.
You never know. So very good. Very good. Could you, I want to take a little sidestep. You've done a lot of work with Alan Bice. And you said you did a Grammy record together. You had
that was Play from 2014 that won the 2015 Grammy for Best Solo Instrumental Classical Division in the Classical Division Solo Instrumental Album. So it's kind of like it's the award that like Yo-Yo Ma won a bunch of times and Itzhak Perlman, and so it was cool to be in that kind of company.
And how did that get to that stage? Because not everyone who cuts a record goes that direction. Like how was that?
Well, you're eligible. I don't know what it is now, but in those days you were eligible for the Grammy if you had 5 commercial releases. 5 releases, not self-produced, but in those days they had to be on an actual label, like a legit. So I had 2 on Naxos and I had 3 with the Metheny album that I did that was 5. So that after that point, we started, the next solo album was like Bach lute works, right? And then, so we submitted that one and so I was eligible. I was eligible to do that one. That was the first one that I was eligible to do. And then any of the collaboration records, any duo records, so we submitted those that came out. And then, then Play, I think, was the next solo album after that. Yeah. Because the Bach was 2006 and well, wait, no. Bach was 2009. And then Play was like 2013 or something like that. So it was amazing that it got nominated because I really didn't feel like I had a lot of connections. I to vote, who voters were or what they did. I knew nothing, absolutely nothing about it.
Right.
You know, all I did back then was I would individually email anyone in my contacts list in those days of Gmail. And when it came time to, I didn't even know if they were Grammy voting members or not. I would just say, oh, if you're a Grammy voting member and you're voting, please consider, you know, for your, what they call for your consideration type of thing.
Right. Yeah. I'm a Grammy voting member, a Recording Academy voting member. Great. So I understand some of the process, and I find it very interesting of, like, you know, out of all of these records, because especially being a voting member, you see a ton of material. Yeah, you see a ton of material, and
I don't know how you get through it all. I could never be never be a member of a voting thing.
It takes forever. Yeah, to go through that stuff, and so
Do you get paid? Do you get paid at least to do it?
No.
Oh.
No.
My God.
No, and every voting member has to pay a yearly fee, to be a member.
That's right.
And it was a process to be eligible for it too. You know, you had to be recommended by, you know, some people are already members, and, you know, things like that. And then you had to qualify, you know, have, you know, X amount of, you know, records produced and released and stuff like that.
Yep.
Yeah. So, but yeah, I'm curious of that like path from, like, you know, making the record and then saying, hey, let's submit it for a Grammy, and then, hey, let's get enough votes, you know, to get there. You know, it's there's like, I think, like a mystery somewhere.
Well, there's some mystery. There's some mystery. I do remember that when I did the Bach album, the one before it, I remember that was the first album where Azika was no longer an island in these indie labels. They had secured a distribution deal with Naxos, and I don't think we would have gotten the nomination without that, because Naxos put it all over the radio. The Bach album was all over the radio, and then the play was very popular on radio. It gained. Later on, people would tell me, like, that record was kind of all over the place. You would, like, it really, like, people in the record business and the radio business, they're like, it was a really popular record. Like, it was being played on radio all the time. I didn't know. I really didn't know. So getting the nomination was, you know, amazing. It was really a great shock. It was wonderful.
So it sounds like radio really helped the popularity. And
yeah, I think so. And then I could afford a publicist at that time. At that time, I had a publicist from 2010. And so they were doing their stuff that they do, which I don't understand all the time fully what they do. You know what I mean? Yeah. But they kind of make their moves or whatever. And, you know, they know this person or whatever who can get it around to the radio stations, and that's the game. It's a game. That's how it's done. I think it's largely done that way to this day. Right? Radio is still, like, very powerful, like a very powerful thing. Right.
Radio, and then their I guess their avenues of streaming too.
Right.
Yeah. But it sounds like there's like these kind of groups of people in your music business industry circle that do specific things. Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
My manager, of course, is basically my agent. And then if you can make enough money off the top, you see, I wasn't married yet with kids. Like, in 2010, it took me, when I think of how long it took, when I started with management in 96, it took 14 years for me to be able to afford a publicist and be making enough money off the top after years of eating macaroni and cheese and tuna fish. I made a really nice tuna fish and macaroni and cheese. I would use the Annie's macaroni and cheese, not the Kraft.
Is that gluten free too?
Maybe something, I don't know.
Something like that.
It was back then. It was like an organic choice, so I thought I was really doing myself a big favor,
right?
By splurging a little bit more on the Annie's macaroni and cheese. So, you know, and So yeah, I'd kind of saved up enough or whatever, was making enough off the top to actually afford a publicist for like 25 grand a year. Cause that's what they cost. Cost 2,000, anywhere from 2,000 to 3,000 a month. And the really high powered ones cost as much as 4,000 a month. So it was, so then I had, okay. So by the time that got nominated, I had 4 years of PR, right? Oh, that was, no. And I had PR before then with Melina Berry. Sorry. I could only afford, that's why I couldn't afford a full-time. 2010 was when I could afford Christina Jensen full-time. Before that, I could only do either project basis or half the year with the previous publicist because they were quite expensive. But with that PR, they both did great work. They got me in print articles and magazines and stuff, like print magazines and that kind of thing. So that built a kind of a groundswell, right? So when that record hit and then it hit, it's like that intersected very well with sort of my rise as a kind of a name in classical music. That's my interpretation of it anyway. That's what it seemed like what was happening. You could feel it. You could feel that something was happening. Like it was just something you felt in your bones. Like this is really moving in a great direction. After the pandemic, it was devastating, to that kind of thing. And I haven't been able to have a publicist since then. Oh, because we had circle the wagons for, a few years. So, right. Cause I had 2 kids. I decided to get married based on this, I wanted to get married. I always wanted to find a really good person to settle down with. Yeah. And maybe have kids, and things were rolling. So I had the confidence to do that. Right. And then, but they were 5 and 3 when the pandemic hit, and that was, that was bad.
So you got young kids, and then, this career that everyone's careers were like shaken.
They're shut off.
Just done. Yeah. Off.
I've never been so scared in my life. You have these 2 kids or whatever, it was crazy. Thankfully, there enough virtuals came around and we pieced it together, and I had a little bit of an emergency fund that we blew through, like in, a few months, whatever it was. Thank God I had the Curtis job. Curtis was done remotely through Zoom. That's when I first started using Zoom, was through Curtis. And then Cleveland Institute of Music, thank God, was on site, and they did a terrific job during the pandemic. I really have to credit our current president with that and that staff. They retrofit the entire school with plexiglass things everywhere. I mean, it looked crazy. Yeah. But as long as you wore a mask and you checked in, you had to do a check-in process if you were sick or something like that. And I think one person got COVID that whole time, that whole transition period.
Wow.
Yeah. They did a great job on that CIM. So we had that, but my wife went back to work. I was basically like the mom for, for a year and a half.
Take care of the kids.
Yeah. Which is great. Which is great when you weren't stressed out about, money and stuff like that. But it was great. We had a lot of fun. And that's the thing. Gabriel was 5. He hadn't really seen me all that much. So we bonded a lot more during that time. Like we really got a lot closer during that time. Cause I had come home when he was 3, and I'd come home and he'd be kind of going like, hey, he had this kind of look on his face like, where have you been? Where have you been?
Yeah, right. Judgmental at 3. Yeah.
Yeah. You give me a little silent treatment there once in a while.
Yeah. Right.
So, yeah.
Yeah.
So every time I complain now about it, all I got to do is think about that, like 2020 and 2021. Like, cause it's hard. It gets harder as you get older to get on planes and actually what I wasn't prepared for when Gabriel was born was how much I was going to miss him and my wife. I thought I was going to basically compartmentalize everything like I did everything else. And that was a shock. that was a bit of a surprise for me. So, yeah.
A blessing in disguise.
Yes.
Yeah. And so we're 6 years from that.
Yeah.
How are things changing?
Robust. It was a bit of an adjustment to get back. Like this year feels like 2016, 2017, 18, like the immediately after the Grammy, like we just had tons of work, that's when people started asking me to collaborate,
Yeah. Yeah.
Then they want to win a Grammy too. Right.
Uh-huh.
That's kind of the game, is like, oh, you collaborate with a Grammy winning artist and then you'll get more visibility and you'll have a better chance is sort of the prevailing strategy there.
Right. Are you going to go for another one?
Well, we'll submit it, but we'll submit this new album. That's all my stuff, all my compositions. It's called Gratitude.
Gratitude
Gratitude with an attitude. No, just kidding. It's just called Gratitude.
And so
that's coming out in March and April. It's all my compositions. A lot of it is stuff I wrote. A lot of it is the stuff I wrote over the pandemic when I, initially I didn't feel like practicing for concerts that weren't there. I was going to practice Bach or whatever I was such a trained animal by then. Everything I practiced was for something in the immediate future. Like a week from now, and then I put that down, and then a week from now, and then put that one, and then play that, and then put that down. Now a week from now is this, or 2 weeks from now is that. So I was so used to that after 15 years of doing that I used the time to stay connected to my guitar, to my playing through just by writing, and that's what this record is.
What are so the album's called Gratitude? What are some of the titles of your compositions?
That's one. That's kind of one I sort of wrote, I kind of think, in honor of my mother in 2019. Premiered that at the Cleveland International Classical Guitar Festival. On my solo recital there. Some of the titles, Tidal Pools is something that I'm playing. I'll be playing that in Florida coming up. Okay. And then Home was a tremolo piece that I thought, I should write it. Like, I want to write an open tuning tremolo piece. Like, not like that hasn't been done before, obviously. Like, Barrio Sueño on la Floresta, of course. But I want to write something that had a little bit more of like an Americana kind of Midwestern vibe. And that's I think the sound of a lot of the tunes on this album are that. They come from that kind of place. Sort of heartland, I guess, as they call it. They sound like things you could play, aside from Home, the tremolo piece, which I've played now probably 50 times. A lot of the other things sound like something you could play on a steel string guitar. And it would sound like perfect. It would sound great.
Interesting. Interesting. Have you tried it on a steel string?
Yeah, if there's one around. Oh, my daughter's got a steel string. She's got a little bitty steel string that she takes her lessons on.
Like a little parlor size.
Yeah, they sound good on it. Some of these tunes sound really great on it.
So is this your first original, like full original record? Yeah.
Oh yeah, for sure.
Yeah. And very cool. Very cool. And you wrote you wrote a lot of them around the pandemic? Is that?
Yeah, I'd say most of them. Most of them were written within that first year. Home certainly was. Tidal Pools, which I'm playing in the same recital, that's a more recent one. I wrote that last year. To finish off the album. See, again, I thought I was going to make I thought the next record was going to be half of my stuff that I wrote over the pandemic and half of my arrangements, like What a Wonderful World or this Rush tune, Limelight, that I did for something. I did it as a one-off for something. And things like that. Live to Tell, I've done it just for my own enjoyment. Live to Tell by Madonna, that's a great song. Sounds great on guitar. Stuff like that. I thought half of it would be that, and then I get there, we make half of the album, we record all my stuff, and then Alan at the end of that session he says, why don't we come back and instead of doing arrangements, if you wrote like 15, 20 more minutes of new stuff, why don't we make this just all, JV compositions? and then the arrangements record will be its own thing.
Mm-hmm.
So there you go. That's what it is.
Nice. I'm really excited to hear that. So you said it's March or April coming up soon.
Should be out in March. I would say by the end of next month.
End of March.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. That's awesome. That's awesome. And you said you're playing one of these on your concerts coming up?
Two of them. Yeah, 2 5-minute pieces. Home's about 5 minutes, and Tidal Pools is about 5 minutes. One on each half.
Uh-huh.
And then Metheny's, the piece that Pat Metheny wrote for me in 2021, right? Four Paths of Light is on it, on this program. This is my regular program this year and next year probably too.
Okay.
Suite del Recuerdo by Merlin, Prelude Fugue Allegro by Bach, and I start with Danza Brasilera, in honor of one of my big mentors, Jorge Morel, and Barrios Waltz in G major, and I think that's about it. Yeah.
That's great. So speaking of those concerts, I'm looking at your schedule here. You got the 21st coming up Saturday. Now this podcast will probably be released after that, this episode. But you got the USC coming up, and then
that's this weekend.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah, and then so let's kind of jump forward to Guitar Sarasota on March 7th.
Yeah.
Have you played for Guitar Sarasota before?
A few times. Probably 3 or 4. Yeah.
That's awesome. And
it's always great. They're great. Love the people there, and my parents lived in Sarasota. For a little while, that was their retirement place. So it's always great it's always nice to come back there. And I've played there. I played in Sarasota for other series too. There's a chamber music series I played on probably about 3 or 4 times. That's run by some Italian folks from Italy. They come over to Sarasota and they put this chamber music thing on. So I've played the Boccherini and the Castle Tedesco on that series. So yeah, Sarasota has been terrific. I used to visit my parents there all the time anyway. I'd be playing in Dallas or something, and I'd just fly over. Back in the early 2000s. That's
great. Yeah, I'm actually right here in Sarasota right now. So
nice.
So yeah, this is where I live, and so that's awesome. That's awesome to hear.
I love it there. I'm really looking forward to hopefully just spending a little bit of time kind of going to my old going to the stomping grounds if they're still there. But I love the marina. Is Marina Jack's still there?
Oh yeah, Marina Jack.
Awesome. They have that tiki bar also that's around there. That's a really cool place. And then there was all kinds of places we used to go to on Siesta Key. My mother always used to like to go to Siesta Key. And then along that I forgot what it's called, Midnight
Pass.
Midnight Pass. You go to Midnight Pass, and then there was this street where Siesta Key Oyster Bar, SKOB is on the strip, and there's a couple restaurants there, and then there's like a biker bar there, and the kind of bikers hang out called I forgot the name of it already. I wonder if those. I just want to go by there and see if those things are still there.
Yeah. When was the last time you were here?
Oh, back when my parents were. I checked when I was playing with the Italians on the Chamber Music Festival. I had a rental car. And I'll have one this time too. So I stopped by my parents' old condo there, kind of drove around, and then checked out. Yeah, just put Siesta Key Oyster Bar in the Navigator, and they just parked and walked around.
Just walked around.
At that time, it looked the same. That the kind of dive bar was still there. That was right by 2 doors down from it. That my dad liked to go to. He used to like to go to that place. But it was just great. I just had so many, like dozens and dozens of really nice times with my parents there. We would have dinner at Turtles. You ever heard of this restaurant, Turtles?
Turtles.
Turtles may not be there anymore.
Yeah.
And then we go down
sure.
then we hit the highway south and go to a place called Sharky's on the Water. And that's in Venice, I think. That's in Venice. So yeah, there were all these places that they, like to go. And so I'd visit as often as I can. I brought Gabriel down there when he was a baby. He was like an infant. Evangeline in 2000, she was born in 2016. She went down there, brought both of them down there with my wife. And yeah, I just had so many memories, It's incredible. They seem like not that long ago, but that was a long time ago. Yeah. It was the early 2000s until about 2015, I want to say. They were there.
2015, yeah. Yeah. It's almost 10 years ago. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Wow. And so that's March 7th for Guitar Sarasota, March 7th at 7:30 p.m. And that's a solo recital at Riverview Performing Arts Center in Sarasota. So I'll attach some info about, some tickets there. I'll just, put your website here. And then the day after, March 8th in Florida, you're playing at Trinity by the Cove Episcopal Church.
In Naples.
In Naples. Yeah.
Yep.
In Naples, Florida. And is that the same program?
Yep. Same program.
Yeah. Same program. Very nice. Very nice.
Yeah, I'm trying to get back to that old school thing. Like, this is the program. If you want it, book it. If you don't book it.
Is that how it usually works? Like when you're like working this out, do you say like, this is my program? Is this okay?
Now, more recent years, I do that because of all the collaborations. I can't be switching on and off to different solo programs now. It's impossible. With kids, it's impossible.
Right.
So.
Right. Yeah. Do you ever have venues that say like, hey, can you play that one piece?
Not anymore.
Not anymore.
No, I don't. No, they're pretty cool with whatever.
Yeah.
Like if I said, if they have a piece on there, like, well, he played that last time, and if that's a deal breaker, then it's a deal breaker. What can you do?
Yeah. Very good. Very good. Well, I think that was a really, really great time today. Yeah.
Thank you.
We covered a lot. We covered a lot of stuff.
We did. And I have to start hitting the road to CIM. I got to get over the east side like in a few minutes.
Yeah. You got to beat the traffic there or be part of it. Yeah. So, excellent. Well, thank you so much, Jason. This was an awesome time. And thank you for sharing all of this very insightful, bits and parts of your life and, of your career, and just super grateful for you and to have you on this first episode of the Pluck. So thank you.
Thank you. Thanks.
Looking
forward to seeing when it comes out. Thanks a lot.
Yeah, of course. Yes.
All right.
Okay. Take care.
Bye, Jonathan. Take care.
Bye, Jason.